My name is Kyle Breckenridge. This is going to be the talk on responsive web design, or why your site looks terrible on Grandma TV. And you are welcome to clap. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just give you some numbers. I'm sure all of you have seen a lot of these before about mobile market share and what people are actually doing on mobile devices. 76% of American adults have a smartphone. 34% of them also have a tablet computer. And the main number that I wanted to show here was 77% of mobile searches are in a location where a computer is available. So 70% of these searches aren't occurring when people are walking up and down the street. They're occurring when people are at home watching TV, using their mobile device instead of a tablet computer even when it's available. What this means is we need to get away from the mindset of we need to make sure that the information we're giving them is pertinent to the person who's on the street, and we need to make sure that the information we're giving them is pertinent to the web user in general. To give you some more Sonoma County context, at thepressdemocrat.com, roughly 30% of all traffic is coming from a phone or a tablet right now. So, and that's about half and half between phones and tablets. So this is kind of a way for people to see the argument of, well, people aren't accessing stuff in Sonoma County, they're not using their smartphones. Yes, they are. So the first question is, when talking about responsive web design, that it is similar to mobile in certain respects. So why not just use a mobile website? Mobile websites target specific mobile devices using what's called user agent detection. I know that's kind of a big scary word, whatever, but the basic idea behind it is when we set up a mobile device, we tell it to look for very specific devices using the user agent string. And that would be things like your iPhone, your Droids, all the different Samsungs, and so on. What this doesn't take into account is future devices that might have different user agent strings. An example of that would be the Windows phones. The first Windows phones that came out were using Internet Explorer 9. When the new version came out, they started using Internet Explorer 10. If you had a mobile device that was developed before the new phones came out, they were only detecting IE9, so an IE10 based phone would not see a mobile website, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a mobile website developed. That also doesn't take into account varying phone sizes. The iPhone 4 was about 2 by 3 inches roughly, and now we have the Galaxy Note 2, which is 5.5 inches tall. A site that was designed to look good on an iPhone and devices of that era is not going to look nearly as good on the larger phone device. That also doesn't take into account varying desktop displays. These numbers over here, basically each one of these is just talking about the dimensions of a screen. The fact that you can see that there isn't one screen other than the standard 768 by 1024 that has more than 10% share when we're looking at thepressdemocrat.com means that there are tons and tons of different display resolutions that are all accessing the website at once. What we want to do is provide the best possible solution for every single device that accesses it, as opposed to attempting to target very specific devices. In other words, this can no longer be considered the web.
Is that Grandma's computer?
Yes. This is the web now. You've got laptops, tablets, smartphones, old slider phones, old flip phones still have web browsers in them, and the one that I really like in the bottom right-hand corner, TVs. A lot of people are starting to use their TVs to browse the internet. The other thing to remember is this is the future. There are now being cars that are developed with internet browsers in them. Refrigerators.
That's not distracting.
Well, oh, I'm buying a refrigerator like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It does have web on it.
You are buying one?
Yes, I was at a. They have a refrigerator at what's that? Best Buy. No, at Best Buy that has it has allrecipes.com. It has weather. It has yeah, it's awesome. So
So as we're talking about website development now, we need to consider the fact that someone could be getting a late night snack and want to do a search for your website on their refrigerator. So
That's what I think
Yeah,
about
consider.
when I'm getting my late night snack.
So with that in mind, you have all these different things, all these different possibilities, all these different quality levels on screens.
Leprechaun?
How do we handle addressing all these different types of devices? One possible solution is adaptive, and I'm not gonna read that long definition, these slides will be available if people wanna look at them later. But the basic idea behind what adaptive is I know the width of an iPad, I know the width of an iPhone, I'm going to target those specific devices and tell my website that if I'm smaller than an average desktop, I'm going to shrink down to tablet size. If I'm smaller than an average tablet, I'm going to shrink down to phone size. That's assuming too much about what type of device is going to be accessing the website. And it's a little bit lazy, because instead of making my website display really good on all devices, I'm only making my website display well on the very specific devices that I have decided to target. So that's where responsive web design comes in. What is responsive web design? So what, if I was to ask you right now what's responsive web design, what do a couple of people want to shout out what they think it is?
A
Anyone?
website that adapts to the size of the browser no matter what it is.
Anybody else? Okay, that's pretty much
It's
right.
a stretchy
I love that.
So, here's the full definition, here's the full definition, this one I'll read. Responsive web design is a web design approach aimed at crafting sites to provide an optimal viewing experience, easy reading and navigation with a minimum of resizing, panning, and scrolling across a wide range of devices from desktop computer monitors to mobile phones. Basically, that means a responsive website uses a fluid or changing layout to adapt to any screen size.
Stretchy. Stretchy.
Exactly.
I like that.
What does that actually mean? The key advantage is that it's future-proof. No matter what size website comes out, what size device comes out at a later date, it's always going to resize itself to fit nicely inside of that device. You have content parity. What that means, every single piece of content that is available on the desktop website is also available on the mobile website. We adjust how it displays and where it lives, but every single piece of content is there for the user to view. It's better for SEO because we don't have to do a separate subdomain, which means now we're splitting traffic for the website across two different websites. So now instead of having 500 views on my mobile website and 1,000 views on my desktop website, I have 1,500 views on my website. It's also something that Google particularly likes because they don't have to split where they're looking for how the traffic is coming in and graceful degradation, I know people like to laugh at this word. What it basically means is responsive web design is relatively new. It is supported on all major smartphones, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to resize and scale appropriately on older devices. So if someone is still using, we'll say, Windows XP with Internet Explorer 7, unfortunately, that's not going to be responsive. But when we create
Or a BlackBerry.
yeah, or
Yeah, who does
we won't
that?
talk
I know,
about
right?
people on Blackberries. The new ones, though, can handle responsive design.
Great.
So what we do to support certain devices like that is we'll set up what's called the max width fix. So basically, I'll detect, is this an old browser that doesn't support it, and then I'll say just force it to always be a regular size max width website. So you're never going to have a problem where it's going to look broken and just won't display properly for certain devices. The other thing, of course, is that it makes you look cool. Which, when you come down to branding, that's pretty much what you're doing. You're just trying to look cool. So, during this part of it, let's just take a second to take a look at a couple of websites. So one last thing, in case you weren't already confused, lost completely on what I'm talking about. There is the concept of responsive web design and a mobile website. The idea behind this is there are some very specific business models where they need to have a separate user experience on mobile and on desktop. Some examples of those, the primary one will always be banks. That the mobile user on a bank is most likely not currently in the research phase, they're currently in the functionality phase, which means when I load up the Bank of America website on my phone, I'm not looking to find out information about Bank of America, I'm looking to access my account. So that mobile experience needs to be very tailored to that specific user type. That being said, what we've been talking about a lot during this presentation has been that this isn't just for mobile. This is for the refrigerator, this is for the car, this is for 1,400 different desktop displays. So having their desktop site be responsive as well as having a mobile website will provide the optimal user experience. Obviously, the limiting factor there is always going to be budget, but for people who need a very specific one, another example would be if the Wells Fargo Center, that they don't really need to provide the same information on their mobile website that they provide on the desktop website, at least not on the homepage. On the homepage, what they could really just have is a scrolling section for events and a way to register. And then we can go into the additional details of what the Wells Fargo Center is on separate pages. So they might need a separate mobile website while still having a responsive website so that no matter what desktop monitor is viewing it, it'll still look good. And then all these slides will be available online. I'll have a link sent out to everybody so they can see some of the references as to where some of the statistics and numbers were pulled. But now I'll pass it back to Deb to talk about the